The containment unit hummed as it floated through the corridor of the Celestial Institute of Xenobiology, its reinforced walls obscuring the creature inside from casual view. Professor Dexnell walked ahead of the transport team, his forearms gesturing enthusiastically as he rehearsed his lecture. In his mind, today would be the pinnacle of his career day. He would show the brightest students in the galaxy what true danger looked like. The lecture hall filled quickly. Students from 100 worlds took their seats, their various forms creating a tapestry of galactic diversity. Crystalline silicates refracted light from their seats in the back. Towering Krathan warriors had to use specially reinforced benches. The ethereals floated near the ceiling, their gaseous forms contained in personal atmosphere bubbles. Among them sat Lyra, a young empathic resonant from Desha Ivir. Pale blue skin seemed to glow softly in the lecture hall's light. She adjusted her neural dampeners, the small devices that kept her from being overwhelmed by the emotional broadcasts of hundreds of beings in close proximity. Her species felt everything: joy, sorrow, fear, anger, all of it rippled through her consciousness like waves on water. The dampeners helped, but they could never completely silence the empathic noise. Professor Dexnell entered to polite applause. His reputation preceded him. He was the Coalition's foremost expert on Deathworld species, those rare and terrifying creatures that evolved on planets so hostile that their very existence seemed to violate the laws of probability. Students, he began, his translator rendering his clicks and whistles into galactic standard. Today you will witness something extraordinary. Today you will understand why the Coalition maintains strict quarantine protocols around certain worlds. The containment unit was brought forward and positioned at the center of the lecture floor through the translucent energy barriers. The students could now see movement, something paced inside, back and forth with unsettling regularity. This, Dexnell announced, is a human captured from the planet they call Earth, a Class 12 death world in the outer spiral arm. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Even students who specialized in other fields had heard of Earth. It was legendary among xenobiologists, a world so lethally hostile that it had produced thousands of apex predator species, all competing for dominance. Observe the specimen's behavior, Dexnell continued. Note the persistent movement pattern. This is a creature evolved for persistence hunting. While we evolved intelligence to escape our predators, humans evolved intelligence to chase theirs. They would follow prey animals for days, sometimes weeks, never stopping, never resting, until their target collapsed from exhaustion. A silicate student raised a crystalline appendage. Professor, surely that's exaggeration. No species can run for weeks without rest. Dexnell's face split in what his species considered a smile. Can't they? Human skeletal structure is optimized for endurance running. Their cooling system, they call it sweating, allows them to regulate body temperature while in motion, something most species cannot do. They have a reflex called a runner's high that literally drugs their own brain with pleasure chemicals to keep them moving through pain. He gestured at the cage. This specimen has been in containment for 3 cycles. It has not slept more than 4 hours total. Even now, in captivity, its instinct is to move, to search, to persist. Lyra felt something twist in her chest. She glanced at her dampeners, wondering if they were malfunctioning. The emotion bleeding through wasn't what the professor described. Wasn't predatory drive or hunting instinct. It was loneliness, desperate, aching loneliness. Let us discuss their dietary adaptability. Dexnell continued. Humans are omnivores, capable of consuming almost any organic matter. They possess digestive systems that can handle toxins that would kill most of us. On their world, they regularly consume poison for pleasure. Substances like capsaicin and alcohol. More murmurs from the Students several looked uncomfortable, but perhaps most disturbing is their capacity for what they call pack bonding, the professor said. Humans will form emotional attachments to virtually any other creature. They have been observed attempting to befriend and domesticate species that actively hunt them. This psychological compulsion makes them simultaneously dangerous and unpredictable. A human might try to kill you, or might try to adopt you as a pet. You cannot know which until it's too late. The creature in the cage stopped. Pacing Lyra felt the shift in emotional resonance, like a physical blow through the energy barriers. She could see the human clearly now was female by human standards. With dark hair pulled back from its face, it wore torn clothing that had once been some kind of uniform. But it was the eyes that caught Lyra's attention. The human's eyes swept across the lecture hall, taking in the assembled students with obvious intelligence. This was no mindless beast. This was a thinking, feeling being, and it was terrified, and alone the human's gaze locked onto Lyra's. For a moment, everything else faded. The emotional connection was so strong that Lyra's dampeners sparked and failed. She felt everything the human felt the fear. Yes, but also the determination, the scientific curiosity, even in captivity, the bone-deep exhaustion, and underneath it all, that howling loneliness, the need for connection that the professor had called pack bonding. The human's lips moved at first. No sound came out. Then she pressed herself against the energy barrier, her hands gripping the frame of the containment unit when she spoke. Her voice was rough from disuse, but the words were clear, pronounced in perfect galactic standard with only the slightest accent. "Please," the human said, staring directly at Lyra. "Please, let me out." The lecture hall erupted. Students leaped from their seats. Several screamed. The Krathan warriors activated defensive protocols, their armor plating extending with metallic clicks. Professor Dexnell stumbled backward, his forearms flailing. "Impossible," he stammered. "The translator must be malfunctioning. It cannot actually be speaking." But the human ignored him. She kept her eyes fixed on Lyra. And now Lyra could feel the desperate hope radiating from her. The human had been silent for weeks, letting them think she was primitive, but she had been listening, learning, waiting for the right moment. "My name is Sarah Chung," the human said. "I am a xenolinguist from Earth. I was taken from my research vessel 23 days ago. I have been held here against my will, subjected to examinations and tests without consent. I am not a specimen. I am a person, and I'm asking you, please, to let me go home." Alarms began to sound. Security drones descended from ceiling hatches. Professor Dexnell was shouting orders, his carefully planned demonstration collapsing into chaos around him. But Lyra couldn't look away from the human. From Sarah, she had spent years studying the ethics of first contact, the principles that were supposed to guide the Coalition's interactions with developing species. Those principles were being violated right in front of her, and no one else seemed to care. The containment unit was being moved, security teams rushing to escort it out of the lecture hall. Sarah pressed her face against the barrier one last time, her eyes still locked on Lyra's. "Please," she said again. "Please don't let them do this." Then she was gone, the containment unit disappearing down the corridor as emergency protocols sealed the lecture hall. Lyra sat frozen in her seat while chaos swirled around her. Dampeners were completely fried, leaving her drowning in the emotional cacophony of hundreds of panicking students. But cutting through all of it, she could still feel the echo of Sarah's desperate plight. Human hadn't begged to escape. She had begged to be recognized, to be seen as what she truly was. Not a beast, not a specimen, a person. And Lyra realized with absolute certainty that she couldn't let this stand, whatever it cost her, whatever risks it involved. She had to help, because if the Coalition could do this to Sarah, could capture and cage a sentient being and call it science, then everything Lyra had been taught about galactic civilization was a lie. She stood up, her legs shaking, and walked toward the exit behind her. Professor Vexenol was already spinning the incident to the other faculty members, insisting that the translator had malfunctioned, that the human had merely mimicked sounds without understanding, that Lyra had felt the truth. She knew what Sarah was, and she was going to make sure everyone else knew it too. The maximum security wing of the Celestial Institute was built to contain the galaxy's most dangerous biological specimen. Sarah's containment unit had been relocated. There, within an hour of her revelation now, she sat in a cell designed for creatures that could tear through steel, surrounded by energy barriers that could withstand a plasma blast. She laughed bitterly at the irony of all this security for one exhausted xenolinguist who just wanted to go home. The cell was larger than her previous cage. At least she could stretch her legs. And there was a sleeping platform. Though the dimensions were wrong for human anatomy, everything here was designed for beings much larger or much smaller than her. She was an afterthought, an anomaly that didn't fit into any of their careful categories. Sarah ran her fingers along the energy barrier, feeling the tingle of the field against her skin. 3 weeks ago, she had been on the research vessel Curiosity, part of humanity's first faster-than-light expedition. They had been so excited, so hopeful. First contact was supposed to be humanity's greatest achievement. Instead, it had become her nightmare. The memory played in her mind like a loop. She couldn't stop. The Curiosity had detected an abandoned structure on an ice moon orbiting a gas giant. The team had voted to investigate. Sarah could still remember the thrill of seeing alien writing for the first time. Actual proof that humanity wasn't alone in the universe. She had been documenting the script, her hands shaking with excitement. When the ship appeared, Professor Vexenol's research vessel had dropped out of FTL. Like a predator pouncing on prey, the Curiosity's crew tried to flee. But their experimental drive was no match for technology thousands of years more advanced. They were captured, scanned, and cataloged. Sarah's crewmates, the pilot, the engineer, the medical officer, had been released after initial examination. Vexenol deemed them too primitive to be worth detailed study. But Sarah had been different. She had been caught in the act of analysis, of attempting to decode the alien writing. That single moment of intellectual curiosity had sealed her fate. The professor decided she was worth keeping, worth studying for weeks. Sarah had pretended she kept her face blank when they ran their tests. She didn't react when they discussed her biology like she was a lab rat. She learned their language in secret, piecing together galactic standard from the conversations happening around her cage. She knew if she revealed her intelligence too soon, they might do something worse than study her. They might see her as a threat. But today, when she had looked into that young alien's eyes, Lyra, she had heard others call her, something had broken. Sarah had felt the connection, felt that someone in that lecture hall actually saw her as a person that had been worth the risk. Now she just had to hope she hadn't made a fatal mistake. Footsteps echoed in the corridor outside her cell. Sarah stood, her body automatically assuming a defensive posture. Years of martial arts training, something she had taken up as a hobby back on Earth, kicked in. Humans were persistence hunters, yes, but they were also tool users, problem solvers, fighters when they needed to. The door opened and Lyra entered. Alone, Sarah felt her shoulders relax slightly. The young empathic resonant looked nervous, her pale blue skin flickering with bioluminescent patterns that Sarah guessed indicated stress. "You shouldn't be here," Sarah said quietly. "If they catch you, I filed a formal complaint with the ethics board." Lyra interrupted. Her voice was soft but determined. "I cited 17 violations of the Coalition's first contact protocols. My advisor told me I was committing academic suicide. He might be right, but I don't care." Sarah felt something warm bloom in her chest. Hope. Maybe, or just gratitude that at least one being in this entire galaxy gave a damn. "Thank you," she said. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did. Lyra replied. She moved closer to the energy barrier. Close enough that Sarah could see the complex patterns in her skin. The way they shifted and changed with her emotions. My species feels what others feel. When you looked at me in that lecture hall, I felt everything. Your loneliness, your fear, your determination. You're not a specimen. You're a person. And what they're doing to you is wrong. Sarah swallowed hard. She hadn't cried since her capture. Crying was a waste of water. A waste of energy she might need. But now, faced with this simple act of kindness from an alien stranger, she felt tears burning in her eyes. I need to know what happened, Lyra said. How did you end up here? What is Professor Thexnell really doing? So Sarah told her. She explained Earth's first FTL experiment, the discovery of the abandoned station. Her capture and the release of her crew. She described the weeks of isolation. The tests, the constant observation. Lyra listened without interruption. And Sarah could see the horror growing in her expression. He told the Institute that your ship was unmanned, Lyra said when Sarah finished. He claimed you were found alone, exhibiting unusual behavior, and that he captured you for study under the dangerous species protocols. He lied in his official reports. Of course he did, Sarah said bitterly. The truth would have gotten him arrested. The Coalition has first contact rules, right? Strict ones, Lyra confirmed. Capturing a sapient being from an uncontacted world is one of the most serious crimes in our legal code. It's considered slavery. Then why hasn't anyone stopped him? Lyra's bioluminescent patterns flared bright red, an emotion Sarah couldn't identify. Because no one knows you sapient, she said. To them, you're just a clever animal. The professor has spent weeks building a narrative. Deathworld predator. Dangerous instincts, mimicry abilities. When you spoke in the lecture hall, he immediately claimed it was just sophisticated mimicry. Like a parrot repeating sounds. Most people believed him. Sarah laughed. A harsh sound. Of course they did. It's easier to believe the lie. Easier than admitting they've been complicit in a crime. She turned away from the barrier, her hands clenching into fists. The anger felt good. It was better than the despair that had been threatening to consume her. I need to get you out of here. Lyra said no, Sarah replied. Surprising herself, we need to do more than that. She spun back to face the young. Resonant. Getting me out just saves one person. But if Thexnell did this to me, he might have done it to others. We need evidence. We need to expose what he's really doing. Lyra's eyes widened. You want to investigate? But how? You're locked in a maximum security cell. Sarah smiled. And she knew it probably looked predatory. She couldn't help it. You have access to the Institute's systems, right? As a student? Limited access, yes. Then we start there. Look for his research files, his expedition logs, anything that might show a pattern. And Sarah examined the cell around her. We'll figure out how to get out of here when the time comes. Humans are very good at escaping cages. We've had a lot of practice throughout our history. Lyra hesitated, and Sarah could see the fear in her. This wasn't what the young alien had signed up for. Filing a complaint was one thing. Conspiracy to break out a prisoner was something else entirely. You don't have to do this, Sarah said gently. You've already done more than anyone else. If you want to walk away, I understand. No, Lyra said firmly. The red in her patterns shifted to a deep purple that Sarah guessed meant determination. I'm going to help you, not just because it's right, though it is, but because if the Coalition can do this to you, can cage and study a sapient being and call it science, then everything I believe about our civilization is wrong. I have to know the truth, even if it destroys me. Sarah felt that warmth in her chest again. Stronger now. This was what humans did. They pack-bonded. They found their people, their tribe. Even across species lines, even when it was illogical and dangerous. She had only known Lyra for a few hours. But she would have trusted her with her life. Maybe that made her a fool. Or maybe it made her human. Okay, Sarah said. Then here's what we do. You search the databases. Look for anything related to Earth. To humans, to unscheduled expeditions. I'm betting this isn't the first time he's visited my planet. The language, the biological knowledge he has, you don't get that from a single capture. He's been studying us for a while. And if he has, Lyra said, understanding dawning in her eyes, then there might be other victims. Other people he's taken and released. Exactly. Earth has stories. Sarah continued. Legends about people who disappear and come back with missing time. Strange marks, memories that don't quite fit. We always thought they were just stories. But what if they weren't? What if Vexenol has been abducting humans for years, studying us, and then wiping our memories and sending us home? Lyra looked sick. Her skin had gone pale. The bioluminescent patterns dimming almost to nothing. That would be monstrous. Sarah finished. Yes, it would be monstrous. And it would mean he's not just guilty of capturing me. He's guilty of systematic exploitation of an uncontacted species. That's not just a crime. That's grounds for species rights violations at the highest level. The Coalition Council would have to intervene. They would be forced to make contact with Earth. To inform your people of what happened. Sarah nodded, which is exactly what I want. Not first contact through official channels. With years of preparation and cultural exchange. First contact on my terms. With evidence of crimes that demand justice. If we can prove what Vexenol has done, we force the galaxy to recognize Earth. We make them see us as people, not specimens. Lyra was quiet for a long moment, processing everything. The Institute's data archives existed in a vast digital network that spanned multiple dimensions of storage space. Lyra sat in her dormitory room, her personal terminal glowing softly in the darkness. As she navigated through layers of academic databases, her hands trembled slightly as she entered her access credentials. What she was about to do could get her expelled, or worse, the main research database opened before her. A sprawling constellation of data points, representing thousands of research projects across hundreds of worlds. She started with the obvious search. Vexenol's published papers. The professor had an impressive publication, record spanning 4 decades papers on death world ecology, predator-prey dynamics, evolutionary adaptation under extreme conditions, all legitimate research. All properly cited and peer-reviewed, but Lyra had learned to look deeper. She opened the metadata, examining not just what was published, but what was referenced, what was cited, what data sources were used, and there, buried in footnote after footnote, she found the pattern Earth appeared in. Vexenol's research going back 23 years of observations, 23 years of data collection, 23 years before the Coalition had any official contact with the human homeworld. Her stomach turned. Sarah had been right. This wasn't a single opportunistic capture. This was systematic. Long-term exploitation. Lyra dug deeper, using her family's security clearance to access expedition logs. The Institute required all research vessels to file flight plans and mission reports. Most researchers complied with minimal detail, just enough to satisfy the bureaucracy, but the logs were there, preserved in the archives. Waiting for someone to connect the dots, she found the first reference to Earth dated 41 years ago, an unnamed Mamman-class planet in the outer spiral arm. Notation indicating primitive radio transmissions detected. The expedition leader, Vexenol, had been young then, just starting his career. Over the following decades, the entries multiplied. Quick survey trips, usually lasting only a few days. The official purpose was always vague. Sample collection, atmospheric analysis, ecological survey. But now Lyra could see them for what they really were: hunting trips. He had been visiting Earth for 4 decades, studying humanity in secret, taking what he wanted. The question was, had he only taken Sarah, or had there been others? Lyra created a new search algorithm, looking for any mention of human biological samples, tissue analysis, genetic sequencing. The database churned through petabytes of information while she waited. Lyra thought about Sarah locked in that cell. The human had been so strong during their conversation, so determined, but Lyra's empathic senses had felt the exhaustion underneath. The toll that weeks of isolation and fear had taken. Humans needed social contact. Sarah had explained it during their talk. How solitary confinement was considered torture on Earth. How humans literally went insane without companionship. The Coalition was unknowingly torturing her. Just by keeping her alone, the search completed. Lyra stared at the results, her bioluminescent patterns flaring bright red with horror. 347 genetic samples, 347 different human DNA profiles in Nexinal's private research database. Not all of them could be from direct captures. Some might be samples taken from discarded materials, from hair or skin left behind, but even a fraction of that number meant dozens, maybe hundreds of abductions. Lyra's fingers flew across her terminal. She accessed the detailed records, looking for patterns in the genetic data. What she found made her feel physically ill. The samples were organized by date and location. Thex, Anal, had been systematically visiting different regions of Earth, taking samples from different populations. He was building a comprehensive map of human genetic diversity. But why? The answer came when she found his classified proposal, submitted to a private research consortium 5 years ago. Document was marked with security restrictions that should have blocked her access. But her parents' council credentials overrode them. Lyra read the proposal with growing horror. Thexanol was offering to provide genetic material for enhancement research. Multiple Coalition species had been buying human DNA, using it to study traits like endurance, temperature tolerance, and healing factors. The proposal specifically mentioned military applications, enhanced soldiers with human stamina, medical treatments based on human immune responses, modifications to allow other species to survive in harsh environments. Earth wasn't just being studied, Earth was being harvested, and Dexinol was making a fortune selling humanity's genetic heritage to the highest bidder. Lyra immediately copied everything to an encrypted storage device. This was bigger than one professor's crimes. This implicated private corporations, maybe even Coalition military contractors. She needed to get this information to someone who could act on it. Her parent would know what to do, but as she prepared to transmit the data, alarms began blaring throughout the dormitory. Lyra's terminal flashed red UNATHRIZ data secured protocols. NGG, she had been discovered. Zexa must have monitoring programs watching for anyone accessing his classified files. Lyra grabbed the storage device and ran behind her. She could hear security drones powering up in the hallway. The Institute's eye had flagged her as a threat. She sprinted through the corridors, her heart's pounding. Students emerged from their rooms, confused by the alarms. Lyra pushed past them, heading for the emergency transit stations. She needed to get to Sarah if security caught her. They would confiscate the evidence, but if she could reach Sarah's cell, maybe they could find a way to transmit the data before being captured. The transit station was crowded with students evacuating according to safety protocols. Lyra merged with the crowd, trying to blend in. Security drones swept overhead, their sensors searching for her biosignatures. Ducked into a maintenance corridor, one of the narrow passages used by service personnel. Her small frame gave her an advantage here. The drones couldn't follow into the tight spaces. She navigated by memory and instinct, heading down toward the security wing. Twice she had to backtrack when she heard security teams ahead. The Institute was going into full lockdown. Whatever monitoring systems Dexinol had in place They had triggered a massive response. He must have convinced someone she was dangerous, or maybe he had just revealed that she was trying to expose his crimes. Either way, Lyra was now a fugitive in the place that had been her home for 2 years. She finally reached the security wing through a waste processing shaft. The smell was terrible. But she emerged into a corridor near Sarah's cell. Alarms were blaring here. 2 guards rushed past. Responding to alerts elsewhere in the facility, Lyra waited until they passed, then approached Sarah's cell. The human was already standing at the barrier, clearly aware something was happening. "Lyra," Sarah said with visible relief. "What's going on?" "I found it," Lyra gasped. "All of it. Decades of abductions. Hundreds of genetic samples. He's been selling human DNA for military research." "This is so much worse than we thought." Sarah's expression hardened. "How bad?" Lyra held up the storage device. "Bad enough that he triggered a station-wide alert when I accessed the files. Security is hunting me. We need to get this data out. But I don't know how." Sarah examined the cell's control panel through the barrier. "Can you access the security systems from out there?" "Maybe," Lyra said, "but I'm locked out of most networks now." "Try anyway." "Wrote through your parents' council credentials. If this is as big as you say, we need to bypass the Institute entirely. Send it straight to the Coalition Council." Lyra's fingers shook as she connected her terminal to the wall panel. She navigated through layers of security, using every access code and override her family connections provided behind them. Footsteps echoed in the corridor. Security teams were getting closer, almost there. Lyra whispered. The upload bar crawled across her screen. 30%, 40%. Freeze. A security team rounded the corner. Weapons raised. Lyra kept her hands on the terminal, watching the upload continue. 50%, 60%. "Step away from the prisoner," the team leader commanded. "You are under arrest for unauthorized access and conspiracy." Just a few more seconds. Lyra muttered. 70%. Sarah pressed against the barrier, watching the guards approach. "Lyra, whatever happens." "Thank you." 80%. The guards were almost upon them. 90%. I said freeze. 100%. UPLOACOMP. Lyra stepped back from the terminal, raising her hands. "It's done," she said quietly. "The council has everything." The security team leader looked confused. "What did you do?" "I exposed a criminal conspiracy," Lyra said, her voice stronger now. "Professor Dexenol has been conducting illegal experiments on uncontacted species for 4 decades. He has abducted sentient beings, harvested their genetic material, and sold it for profit. The evidence is now with the Coalition Council. You can arrest me, but you can't stop what's coming." The team leader's expression shifted from anger to uncertainty. Those are serious allegations. They're true," Sarah called out from her cell. "And I'm living proof. My name is Dr. Sarah Chun. I'm a xenolinguist from Earth. I was captured 23 days ago while on a peaceful research mission. I've been held prisoner and studied like an animal." Everything Lyra said is true. The guards looked at each other. Sarah could see the doubt creeping in. They had been told she was a dangerous specimen, a clever animal. Sarah examined the cell's energy barrier with the methodical focus of a scientist studying a problem. The containment field was powerful, designed to hold creatures that could tear through reinforced steel, but every system had weaknesses. Every cage had a key. "The barrier generators are in the ceiling," she said, pointing upward. "They create a spherical field, but the power distribution isn't even. See how the energy flickers slightly near the corners? That's where the field is weakest." Lyra looked up, her enhanced vision picking out the subtle variations. Sarah described. "I see it. But even at its weakest point, that field would burn through my hand if I tried to reach through." "It would," Sarah agreed. "But I'm not planning to reach through it. I'm planning to overload it." She moved to the sleeping platform and began dismantling it. The material was some kind of synthetic polymer. Lightweight but durable. Sarah twisted and bent the components until she had a long rod with a sharp point. Humans are tool users, she explained as she worked. We've been making weapons since before we developed language. Give a human enough time and materials, and we'll find a way to fight back. She positioned herself beneath one of the barrier generators and began scraping the rod against the cell's metal floor. The friction created sparks. What are you doing? Lyra asked. Creating a conductor, Sarah said. The barrier is energy, which means it has to ground somewhere. If I can create a path of least resistance, she jammed the sharpened rod upward, piercing the barrier at its weakest point. The energy field shrieked and flared bright. Blue alarms blared, the generator sparked and smoked. Then, with a sound like breaking glass, the entire barrier collapsed. Sarah stumbled forward. Free of her cage for the first time in weeks, she swayed, dizzy from the sudden rush of adrenaline. But Lyra caught her arm and steadied her. You did it. Lyra breathed. Now we run, Sarah said. They sprinted down the corridor toward the maintenance shaft the security team leader had indicated behind them. Sarah could hear more alarms triggering. Security protocols engaging the institutes. AI had detected her escape and was mobilizing every available resource to recapture her. The maintenance shaft was exactly where the guard had said. Lyra pulled open the access panel, and they climbed inside. The passage was narrow and dark, lit only by dim emergency lights. Sarah had to crouch to fit, her human height making the journey awkward, but they moved quickly. Lyra leading the way through passages she had memorized during her 2 years at the Institute. This shaft connects to the environmental systems, Lyra explained as they navigated. From there we can reach the docking bays. But Sarah, even if we get to a ship, where will we go? The entire station is on lockdown. Then we break the lockdown, Sarah said. Her mind was racing, formulating plans and discarding them just as quickly. The emergency protocols. There has to be an override, right? For catastrophic situations? Yes, but only senior faculty have access. Or maintenance personnel in case of systems failure, Sarah smiled grimly. Then we become maintenance personnel. They emerged from the shaft into an environmental control room. Banks of monitors displayed temperature, pressure, and atmospheric composition for every section of the station. 2 Krathan technicians looked up in surprise as Sarah and Lyra stumbled in. For a moment, everyone froze. Then Sarah made a split-second decision. Instead of running or fighting, she walked directly to the main console. Emergency situation, she announced in her best authoritative voice. Containment breach in Sector 7. Possible atmospheric contamination. I need override access to purge the ventilation systems. The senior technician's brow ridges furrowed. I didn't receive any contamination alerts. That's because the sensors are compromised, Sarah said without missing a beat. The breach involved a silicon-based lifeform. It's interfering with electronic systems. We need manual overrides now, or we risk station-wide infection. It was complete nonsense. But Sarah delivered it with such confidence that the technician hesitated. That hesitation was all they needed. Lyra stepped forward, her bioluminescent patterns shifting to colors that Sarah had learned indicated authority and urgency. I'm Lyra of House Thishan, council member's progeny, she said. This human is a coalition witness under my protection. We need your cooperation immediately. The technicians looked at each other. Sarah could see them calculating, weighing their options. Finally, the senior technician made a decision. Computer. Grant temporary override access to Terminal 7. Authorization code KRA, then -4-7-9. Thank you, Lyra said with genuine relief. Sarah immediately began working the console. She had been studying Coalition technology since her capture. Memorizing interfaces and protocols, the systems were complex but intuitive within minutes. She had located the lockdown controls. "I can release the external docking clamps," she said. "But the moment I do, security will know exactly where we are." "Do it," Lyra urged. "We don't have a choice." Sarah entered the override command throughout the station. Massive clamps that held ships in their berths began to disengage on every security monitor. Alerts flashed. Unauthorized override detected. The hunt intensified. Security teams converged on their location from 3 different directions. Sarah and Lyra ran again, this time toward the nearest docking bay. The station's layout worked. Against them, every corridor seemed to have security drones or armed teams, but Sarah's training kicked in. She used her knowledge of human movement and spatial reasoning to find paths the security teams didn't anticipate through a service tunnel here. Across a cargo loading platform there, always moving, always adapting. "How do you know where to go?" Lyra gasped as they squeezed through a gap between 2 storage containers. "I don't," Sarah admitted. "I'm just thinking like a prey animal trying to escape a predator. Humans have been both throughout our evolution. We know all the tricks." They emerged into docking bay 12. 3 small shuttlecraft sat in their berths. Sleek vessels designed for short-range transportation. "Can you fly one of those?" Sarah asked. "Basic certification," Lyra said. "Enough to get us away from the station." They ran toward the nearest shuttle behind them. Security teams burst into the docking bay. "Stop!" someone shouted. Final warning. Sarah and Lyra didn't stop. They were 10 meters from the shuttle when the first energy bolt struck the deck near Sarah's feet. She dove forward. Rolling and coming up in a sprint, Lyra was already at the shuttle's access panel. Her fingers flying across the controls. 5 meters, another energy bolt. This one closer. Sarah could feel the heat as it passed her shoulder. 2 meters. The shuttle's door began to open. 1 meter. Sarah grabbed Lyra and pulled her through the opening door. Energy bolts struck the hull, leaving scorch marks. The door sealed behind them. Lyra ran for the cockpit while Sarah searched for anything to secure the door. The shuttle lurched as Lyra initiated the launch sequence through the viewport. Sarah could see security teams trying to override the departure, but the override Sarah had initiated was still active. The docking clamps released. The shuttle lifted off the deck, spinning toward the bay doors. "They're closing the bay doors," Lyra shouted. Sarah strapped into the co-pilot seat and grabbed the controls. Her fingers found the throttle and pushed it to maximum. The shuttle accelerated, racing toward the narrowing gap as the massive doors. Ground closed. It was going to be close. Too close. "We're not going to make it," Lyra said. "Yes, we are," Sarah insisted at the last possible second. She rolled the shuttle 90 degrees. The narrow profile slipped through the gap with centimeters to spare. They were free behind them. The Celestial Institute's security forces scrambled to launch pursuit craft, but Sarah had bought them precious seconds. "Where do we go?" Lyra asked, her hand shaking on the controls. Sarah was about to answer when a new voice filled the cockpit. "Attention, unidentified shuttle," the voice said. "This is Professor Vexenal. You are in violation of Coalition law. Return to the station immediately or you will be fired." Upon Sarah leaned forward and activated the communication system. "This is Dr. Sarah Chun of Earth," she said clearly. "I am a sapient being who was captured and held against my will. I am now exercising my right to freedom of movement. Any attempt to stop me will be considered an act of aggression against a sentient species." There was silence. Then Vexenal's voice returned, dripping with contempt. "You are a specimen, not a person. You have no rights under Coalition law. Return now or be destroyed." Sarah felt rage burning in her chest. Weeks of captivity, of being treated like an animal. of having her personhood denied, it all crystallized into cold determination. Broadcast this on all frequencies. She told Lyra, "I want everyone to hear." Lyra nodded and opened a wide spectrum. "Channel, my name is Sarah Chung." Sarah began, "I am a xenolinguist. From the planet Earth, I was part of my species' first faster-than-light expedition. We discovered evidence of the Galactic Coalition and were captured by Professor Dexnall. For weeks, I have been held in a cage, studied, experimented on, treated as an animal. But I am not an animal. I am a person. I have thoughts, feelings, hopes, and dreams. I have a family who is mourning my disappearance. I have colleagues who trusted me to represent humanity among the stars. And Professor Dexnall has violated every principle the Coalition claims to stand for." The words poured out of her. Weeks of suppressed emotion finding voice. The Coalition Council chambers had never seen anything like this. Delegates from 300 worlds crowded the vast circular hall, their attention fixed on the central platform where Sarah Chun stood. She wore clothing borrowed from Lyra, simple but dignified. A far cry from the torn uniform she had been captured in. Her hands were steady despite her exhaustion. Above her, holographic displays showed her broadcast on repeat. The message that had gone viral across Coalition space in less than a day. The evidence Lyra had uploaded sat in sealed files, waiting to be presented. But first, Sarah had to make her case the presiding arbiter. An ancient silicate, whose crystalline form refracted light into rainbow patterns, spoke in a voice that resonated through the chamber. "Dr. Sarah Chun, you stand before the Galactic Coalition under extraordinary circumstances. Your broadcast has caused significant disruption throughout Coalition space. Professor Dexnall has been detained pending investigation, but he maintains that you are not a sapient being under Coalition law. Before we examine the evidence of his alleged crimes, you must first prove your personhood. Do you understand?" Sarah nodded. "I understand. You're asking me to prove I'm worthy of basic rights. It's not the first time my species has had to do that." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The arbiter continued, "You may present your case." Sarah took a breath and began. "Members of the Coalition, I come from a world called Earth, located in what you designate as Sector 447. My planet is home to 8 billion humans and countless other species. We are young by your standards. We only developed radio transmission 130 years ago. We achieved our first faster-than-light flight 3 months ago. We are scientifically curious, artistically creative, and socially complex." She gestured to the holographic displays. "I hold a doctorate in xenolinguistics from Cambridge University. I can speak 6 Earth languages fluently. I learned Galactic Standard in 3 weeks while imprisoned, by listening to conversations around my cage. I have published 17 peer-reviewed papers on language evolution and cognitive linguistics. I paint watercolors in my spare time. I have a mother who raised me alone after my father died. I have a younger brother who wants to be an astronaut. I have friends, colleagues, students. I have loved and lost and laughed and cried." Her voice strengthened. "I am not special among my kind. What I can do, billions of other humans can do. We think, we feel, we create, we question. We are sapient by any meaningful definition of the word. Akastan, we are sapient by any meaningful definition." Delegate from the Krathan Commonwealth stood. "But your species is violent," he said. "Your own history is filled with warfare, genocide, exploitation. Professor Dexnall's research documents extensive evidence of human aggression." "Yes," Sarah acknowledged. "We are capable of great violence. We have fought terrible wars. We have committed atrocities against each other and against other species. On our planet, we are not perfect." She looked directly at the Krathan delegate, "but we are also capable of great compassion. We have built civilizations on principles of justice and equality. We create art that moves the soul. We sacrifice ourselves for strangers. We care for our elderly and protect our young. We form bonds across species lines, domesticating and befriending creatures that were once our predators or prey. We are complex, contradictory, and deeply, fundamentally social. Another delegate rose. This one an ethereal. Your broadcast mentioned pack bonding. The delegate said, this trait concerns many coalition members. Species that form indiscriminate attachments can be unpredictable, even dangerous. Sarah smiled sadly. Pack bonding is what saved me. When I was brought into that lecture hall, caged and displayed like an animal, I was breaking. Humans need social contact the way we need air and water. Isolation is torture for us. But then I saw Lyra. She gestured to where the young resident sat in the observer section. She looked at me and saw a person. She felt my loneliness and responded with empathy. She risked everything to help me. Not because she had to, but because it was right. That's pack bonding. It's the ability to form connections across boundaries, to care about others even when it's difficult or dangerous. You call it unpredictable. I call it hope. The chamber fell silent. The arbiter spoke. Again, the council has reviewed the evidence provided by student Lyra of House the Shin. Professor Dexenol's research files indicate 4 decades of unauthorized contact with Earth, including 347 genetic samples from human subjects. The evidence suggests systematic exploitation of an uncontacted species for commercial purposes. This is among the most serious crimes in coalition law. Dexenol was brought forward in restraints. The professor looked diminished, his earlier arrogance replaced by desperation. I was conducting legitimate research. He protested. The humans are dangerous. I was trying to understand them, to protect the coalition. By selling their DNA to weapons manufacturers? Sarah interrupted. By abducting people from their homes and erasing their memories? By keeping me in a cage and calling it science? She turned back to the council. Professor Dexenol didn't study my species to understand us. He studied us to profit from. Use us. He saw sapient beings and chose to treat us as resources. That choice tells you more about him than it does about humanity. The arbiter consulted with other senior council members. Finally, they reached a decision. This council finds Professor Dexenol guilty of unauthorized contact with an uncontacted species, illegal genetic harvesting, and sapient trafficking. He will face the maximum penalties under coalition law. Relief washed through Sarah. So intense she felt dizzy, but the arbiter wasn't finished. However, this creates an unprecedented situation. Earth is now aware of the coalition's existence. Standard first contact protocols are impossible. We must decide how to proceed. This was the moment Sarah had been working toward. Honorable delegates, she said. I have a proposal. The chamber quieted. Humanity didn't ask for first contact this way. We were violated, studied without consent, treated as specimens. But we're also pragmatic. We understand that the galaxy is vast and complex. We know we're young and inexperienced by your standards. So I propose a mutual probationary period. She outlined her plan. Allow Earth limited contact with the coalition, cultural exchange, scientific collaboration, diplomatic dialogue. But let us maintain our sovereignty. Give us time to adjust, to learn, to decide for ourselves whether we want full membership, and give yourselves time to evaluate whether humanity is ready, without the pressure of an all-or-nothing decision in exchange. We'll provide full cooperation with the investigation into Dexenol's crimes. We'll help identify other victims. assist with prosecutions, share our perspective on ethical research protocols. We'll prove through our actions that we deserve to be here, a Vothri delegate objected. But this sets a dangerous precedent. Every uncontacted species could demand such treatment. Not every uncontacted species has been systematically exploited for 4 decades. Sarah countered, not every first contact begins with crimes against sapient rights. Humanity is asking for fairness, not special treatment. We're asking to be judged on our own merits, not on the crimes committed against us. The debate raged for hours. Some delegates argued for full quarantine, sealing Earth away from the galaxy. Others pushed for immediate integration, believing humanity's unique traits could benefit the coalition. But slowly, support for Sarah's proposal grew finally. After what felt like an eternity, the vote came. The proposal, passed by a narrow margin, Earth would join the coalition as a probationary member. The first species ever granted such status. Sarah's legs nearly gave out. Lyra was there instantly, supporting her. "You did it," the resonant whispered. "We did it," Sarah corrected. The Arbiter spoke once more. "Dr. Chan, you will serve as Earth's interim representative while formal diplomatic channels are established. A delegation will accompany you home to begin negotiations with your world's governments. The galaxy is watching. Make us believe in humanity." Sarah stood straight. "Exhausted but determined, I'll do my best. But I should warn you, humans are good at exceeding expectations, especially when people underestimate us." 3 days later, Sarah stood in the observation deck of a coalition diplomatic vessel, watching Earth grow larger in the viewport. Blue and green and beautiful, her home beside her. Lyra gazed at the planet with wonder. "It's so vibrant," the resonant said. "So alive. It's a death world." Sarah reminded her with a smile. "Everything down there is trying to kill everything else. That's what makes it beautiful. The struggle, the adaptation, the sheer stubborn refusal to give up." The diplomatic team was preparing for landing. Representatives from a dozen coalition species, all carefully chosen for their experience and wisdom. Earth's governments had been contacted. The initial response had been chaos, panic, denial, wonder, fear. But slowly, humanity was accepting the truth. They weren't alone. The galaxy was vast and ancient and filled with wonders, and now humanity was part of it, not as victims or conquerors, but as themselves. Sarah thought about the broadcast she would make when they landed, the speech she would give to the united nation. She wouldn't sugarcoat humanity's flaws. She wouldn't pretend they were perfect, but she would tell the truth about what humans were capable of, the good and the bad, the beautiful and the terrible. She would let Earth decide its own future. "Do you think they'll accept us?" Lyra asked.